obviously communication is huge when it comes to investor clients, and all of our investors expect transparency, responsiveness. And so the communication side of it really was the biggest challenge. So as I thought through this question, what are some things we did last year that we haven't done in the past? And Rodney mentioned it. The annual investor meeting is a big part of what we do on the communication side. It's a time when you get together with clients, and you have these opportunities to connect in person. The hallway conversations always are very productive, dinners, and clearly we couldn't do that. So we, along with all the other TMOs and every private equity group in the world, was looking at how do we transition from those kind of meetings to something virtual. And for us, that meant trying to take a roughly 3-day event and condense it down into 1 day, and also try to figure out how to make that productive and give folks a feel for what's happening on the ground. I think Rodney mentioned that as well. The woods tour component is usually the highlight of these annual meetings. So the way we tried to deal with that is both the woods tour side and the in-person presentations is through, first off, a high level of information sharing prior to the meeting. Spend a lot of time delivering content to clients over encrypted, password protected kind of platforms that most people would use. And then when the day arrived for the actual meeting, we did have 4 or 5 hours worth of boring time of people staring at video screen and slides, but at least it gave us the chance to interact with clients who had reviewed information beforehand. And we had multiple speakers in different locations, and went through that kind of financial metric presentation, and then had a live Q&A session to follow that. And then on the woods tour side of it, some things that we did that I think were very helpful and will probably last into the future, is the video delivery piece of this allowed us to share case studies from multiple locations. Typically you would have an annual meeting in one site, and you get to review multiple stops in the forest, but it's one region and kind of one sort of focus where you're out in the woods with investors. In this case, we could create video content with case studies from 3 different regions, and included a walk in the woods with the forester who manages the property, as well as some drone footage. And the feedback was good as it relates to that information. How did the whole thing turn out? I think overall the feedback was positive. We had record attendance, maybe for obvious reasons. It's kind of a low lift to get to the meeting and hit the join meeting button. But I think overall it was positive. It was productive. I don't ever see that format replacing an in-person meeting. I think there's just too much benefit from being in person, but I do see some potential in the future for a bit of a hybrid where you can take the best of both sides and have a combination of in-person and virtual. And then if I've got a couple more minutes, just to mention a few other examples that are a little different than what Rodney mentioned. We did hear from our investor clients a bit of an increased interest in environmental, social, and governance best practices. And for us, what we tried to do there is we utilized a variety of sources to report on over 80 different ESG and impact related metrics. And we published those in a couple of different reports. One was a 25-year retrospective report, and the other was an annual impact report. not a lot of detail to provide there on the technology side, but certainly without technology and long-term data management, the metrics that we were reporting on would not have been possible. So that was critical for those reports. We also, this is not so investor related, but we also had continued FSC and SFI certification audits in 2020, as I'm sure a lot of others did. For us, that included, it was 8 or 9 different properties, and about 90% of that work was done virtually. And even including an audit of a property down in Belize that had to be done 100% virtually because you legally couldn't travel to the country from the outside. So we had on-site employees in Belize providing a live video feed to the auditor who was in Mexico. And then we also had participants on our side who were located here in the United States. So that was a challenge for sure. And the feedback that I heard overall was that it was effective, and we proved that it could be done virtually. Certainly, again, you don't get the same level of quality from having folks on the ground being able to see everything that's happening. But I think overall it was productive, and again, maybe some pieces of that will continue into the future to make the on-sites more productive by doing some virtual stuff beforehand. And then lastly, just a couple items that I think were maybe not directly pandemic related, but that were pushed forward by the pandemic. More data delivery and analysis being done outside of the office-based server environment, and being pushed into the cloud. And one little example of that is that we had started before the pandemic, but it was accelerated, was the development of a timber stand inspection app that allows for cloud-based storage of things like inspection forms and photos, maps, remediation kind of work. So broad range of examples, but those are some of the things that I think were important for us as we experienced the environment of 2020.